Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. We just gave some predictions for the MLB season that is kicking off today. Super exciting stuff there. But now we are going to be switching gears to college basketball as we have another set of very big games that are going to be taking place over the next couple days as the Sweet 16 kicks off. So we're going to be giving some picks for each of those. I guess we'll get right into it here where we can start in I think I'm going to go around the bracket as opposed to just off of what day each of these takes place. But we're going to be starting in the East here with UConn versus San Diego State. A rematch of the national championship from last year. That game tips off tonight. As it currently stands, the spread is UConn by 11.5, which I do understand. We're talking about UConn. They have been a war machine up to this point in the season, 33-3, and through the first two rounds have looked just about untouchable. While San Diego State, I thought that obviously blew out Yale, was very convincing in that one. UAB did push them to the edge a little bit in that matchup during the round of 64, but ultimately some solid runs for both of these teams. I think I'm going to have to go with UConn in this one. I do like that San Diego State is returning a lot of the same veteran leadership such as UConn, where we saw UConn, whether it was to the NBA with three of their top players, lose them. Obviously, San Diego State lost Johnson from last year, one of their starters, but as they match up again here, I'm going to have to go with UConn in this one. I do think that the 11.5 spread is very, very sizable for a San Diego State team that I don't think is going to really let themselves get blown out. At least there's a chance. There's a lot of the time where UConn just doesn't really let you have the chance there, but Brian Dutcher has been a vocal leader for the Aztecs, and I do believe that there is some level of pride that's going to kick in this game. And again, 11.5 is a lot of points to be giving up. So that's where I'm going to lean in this one. Also in the East, we have Illinois versus Iowa State, one of the best games of the round, the Sweet 16. Iowa State is 1.5 point favorites. These are two teams with different identities. Of course, Illinois being the extremely high-powered offense that has been putting on a show really all season, and especially so during the past few weeks, whether it's the Big Ten tournament and now their first two matchups here in the NCAA tournament. I'm going to lean Iowa State with this one. I do believe that they are falling a little bit under the radar. They have the number one defense in the country, according to Ken Pom, versus the number one offense, of course, in Illinois, though. So it's one of those situations where something's got to budge. We will see. Illinois' defense has been playing pretty solid for the first couple games of the tournament, but I'm not sure how battle-tested they really were from Morehead State and Duquesne. Just not necessarily the highest threats, the biggest threats in terms of sort of the responsibility that they have defensively to hold them down in this one. And it's not like Iowa State is the most tremendous offense one way or another. I'm going to lean Iowa State in this one, though, and have them advancing to play UConn. Next up is North Carolina versus Alabama. If you've been watching the show, I've been maybe too harsh on Alabama, but I'm going to stick to my guns here. I don't believe that they are really what it takes to be a championship winning team, just with the real lack of defense. They're very reliant on their offense, which can take you, a handful of rounds into the tournament, but at a certain point, you're going to have to get stops. I know that their game against JMU showed that they possibly can play in a little bit of lower scoring games, but I don't think that is really who they are. I thought that had a large part to do with their win against Grand Canyon. And, UNC comes into this game 4.5-point favorites. I'm not the highest on UNC either. They were, the closest to some degree in terms of out of the 4 number 1 seeds. They were the team that was sort of on the brink of being a 1 or a 2 seed. I do think that their run continues here, and they will be able to beat Alabama. Final game in the East region is going to be Clemson versus Arizona. This is one of the bigger spreads in the game, in the tournament remaining here. I think that Arizona's going to be able to win this one. The line has shifted somewhat in favor of Clemson. It was at least 7.5 when I last looked at it. It's now currently sitting at 6.5. Clemson's a tough team. They've played really hard their first 2 games. Again, the fact that they were able to have that sort of a win versus Baylor without their number 1 scorer in PJ Hall, who is dealing with foul trouble, is saying something absolutely. Arizona is a tremendous team, though. I mean, this would be an absolute statement win for Clemson and really for the ACC as a whole if they are able to pull this one off, because there's been a lot of talk about the ACC and how during the course of the regular season, the selection committee wasn't necessarily giving them the credit that they thought that they deserved. And now the ACC has a chance this weekend to have all of their teams that are remaining match up against different conferences. You have them playing the Pac-12, the Pac-12, the SEC, the Big 12, and the last one is the Big East. So they have a nice challenge ahead of them. We'll see whether or not Clemson is going to be able to come away with it. I know I'm all chalk in this Eastern region, which I don't feel great about. Well, in the East and West, actually. I moved into the West and totally skipped over that. But I am going to go with Arizona in this one, but I do think Clemson has a pretty good shot. In the South, again, I want to be a little bit different here and not chalk, but this is one that I think a lot of people are onto in Houston versus Duke as a potential upset. I just don't see it to that level. Houston is a very physical, very relentless team. Duke is a lot more youth, and I just don't know if they're going to be able to keep up with Houston. We've seen Duke fold in some of these bigger moments during the regular season this year with their losses to UNC and losing to NC State in the first round of the conference tournament, which is not a great sign. Obviously, you look at Duke, the history of the program, and that's not necessarily fair to do so, when it comes to this season, but CBS posted a stat. 1994 was the last time that Duke has defeated a higher seeded team. Duke comes in as the 4 against the 1 in Houston, and Duke has been a very solid team all year, but they've never really been in the conversations of, the best teams in the country, and I don't think that things are going to be different. I feel like a lot of people have sort of been thrown off of Houston because of how close that game was against Texas A&M the other day, but I think that the fact that all those things went wrong for Houston in that matchup and they were still able to come out with it despite, how they had control of that game. They let it slip from them briefly, but they were able to overcome the momentum and end up closing that game out. I have Houston in this one. The next matchup we have here is NC State versus Marquette. Now, my brain is telling me Marquette. I do think that Marquette is a very good team, and they were 2 seed for the reason. The fact that Tyler Kolek has come back as healthy as he has, and he's been putting up this level of production. He was lights out, scored or assisted on all of Marquette's points during the last 8 minutes other than Joplin's game-sealing free throws. So that's a great sign. But I'm going to take NC State in this one for a couple of reasons. One, you got to throw in an upset somewhere along these lines, and I feel like this is the spot for it. I also do feel like DJ Burns is going to be a really difficult cover for Marquette in this one, where, again, I think it's going to come down to Oso Ighodaro versus DJ Burns. Ighodaro has the length, but DJ Burns has 40 pounds on him. We've seen him just continue to be an incredible player. And NC State's another team that last game, yes, it was a close one versus Oakland. So, if this ends up being a blowout, I can't say it would surprise me a ton. But they were dealing with foul trouble in that last one to Diarra and Ben Middlebrooks, who were massive for them in the first round. Michael O'Connell's been a really nice presence for them so far in the tournament. So I'm going to go with the Wolfpack here. Again, I need an upset in this sequence, so that is where I'm going to find it in NC State over Marquette. Finally, the Midwest region, we have Purdue versus Gonzaga. In this game, I'm going to go with Gonzaga. I don't feel great about this one necessarily either. I don't know if they're going to have the defense to be able to stop Purdue, but I do feel like they have the offense that can at least run a high-scoring game against Purdue. I expect this game to be a shootout. We saw Gonzaga and the way that Nembhard was able to run the offense when they took down Kansas and really ran it up on them in the second half. They were able to execute the pick and roll game. They got Hunter Dickinson out on the perimeter more, which opened up the paint and also allowed him to get taken advantage of a little bit while he was on the outside because he doesn't have great mobility either. Kansas wasn't able to make any adjustments, and that's with Bill Self, who is a great coach. Matt Painter is, just as not quite to, because of the fact that we haven't seen the championship come of it, he doesn't have necessarily the same reputation as Bill Self, but he is ultimately just as capable as Self is. We'll see if adjustments are able to be made. And again, this is a game where I do worry a little bit about the fact I don't know if Gonzaga has the defenders to really stop Zach Edey in this situation. It's going to take Graham Ike, who can occasionally get in foul trouble. He's also pretty good once he is in foul trouble of playing disciplined to be able to stay on the court. But this is a very fascinating matchup to me. I'm going to go with Gonzaga in this one. Feel like that's also going to be a pretty popular upset as well, as a lot of people don't like Purdue. Final matchup here is Creighton and Tennessee. I also think this is going to be an incredible game as well. Creighton has one of the best starting fives in college basketball in my eyes. It's just a matter of, do they have the depth to necessarily keep up with Tennessee? I'm curious how this game is going to go because we've seen Tennessee have a really nice offense during a lot of stretches this year, but they are very reliant on Dalton Connect. And what is Creighton going to do to slow him down? Because when he is slowed down, I do think the game can get pretty muddy for Tennessee, which, to be fair, Tennessee is a team that can handle playing in the mud. The number 3 defense in terms of KenPom. So they are cut out for it. But how is this game going to play out? I'm going to lean with Creighton in this one. I don't feel great about this one either. But I'm going to go with it because of the fact that I think that, also, more than anything, if there is a big man matchup I want to see, I know I did just pick Gonzaga, but I would love to see a matchup between Kalkbrenner and Zach Edey to see how that plays out. Creighton has tons of talented offensive players. Again, the depth of them is where things sort of get called into question, but the way that they were able to not tire out during that double overtime game against Oregon, we saw Kusnard and Dante really wear out, and they were doing absolutely everything in that matchup. But the fact that if you go back and you look at that game, you still had the likes of their best players playing basically every single minute of that game, where we saw Trey Alexander play 50 minutes, Baylor Shireman play 50 minutes, Ryan Kalkbrenner playing 49. Stephen Ashworth also played 42 in this one. So a very impressive performance, I thought, against Oregon. Oregon was a little bit of a sleeper, and they were able to fight them off, and I think they come out and they win this game against Tennessee. But so just as a quick recap, I got UConn versus Iowa State for the Elite Eight here. UConn versus Iowa State, North Carolina versus Arizona, Houston versus NC State, and Gonzaga versus Creighton. So that is all we have time for on this segment. We are going to be taking another break, and when we come back, we will be getting into some NBA and the playoff push. So stick with us, and we will be right back.